Hello and welcome to the 84 Million podcast. It is episode 16 today. And we have as our guest Mr. Crypto Anthony. Anthony has been in Bitcoin since 2013. He's the party responsible for bringing the Ordinals protocol to Litecoin. And this protocol he continues to maintain. And as of April 27th, he activated the Runes protocol also on Litecoin. Anthony created the LTC20 indexing platform and minting platform Litescribe, and he can be found on X at ANTHONYONCHAIN. So Anthony, welcome to the show.
G'day, how are you?
Good morning. We're in two different places on planet Earth, but we've made it work. Good morning, good evening. Indeed, good morning. We're glad to have you here, and I'm really excited about our topic today. I think this show has talked about ordinals, tokens to a degree since launch. I think even episode 1, it was mentioned because this show was born in an environment on Litecoin or on ordinals within Litecoin. And yet we've never talked to you, and you're the guy. So really excited about our conversations today. So let's see, ordinals, runes, and fungible tokens on Litecoin. This is our task today. We're grateful to have you here. You brought this ecosystem to Litecoin. The most recent development would be, of course, Runes, which activated, I think, about 2 weeks ago, maybe a little more than that now. And I'd like to unpack these today with you. So you've changed Litecoin forever. And you did this essentially alone, albeit on top of the work of Casey Rodermore. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so Casey did the groundwork for me. All I did was respond to Indigo's bounty and fork what Casey had already worked on, and brought it all to Litecoin. And I guess I got to thank Casey for his initial work, and Indigo for the bounty he put together. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have done it. I probably wouldn't have been motivated enough to have done it in the first place.
Yeah, well, it's certainly interesting, and there's different opinions on it. There have always been different opinions on this, and we'll get a little bit into maybe those opinions in a little bit. But either way, you did port all of this to Litecoin, and it's pretty crazy because it has changed Litecoin forever. We can do things now on Litecoin that we can never do before. And of course, Casey did initially prove this on Bitcoin, but you brought it to Litecoin. Was that a public bounty that Indigo had, or was it private with you? Or I can't really remember if that was, because I think he launched Lightspace, the official campaign, after Ordinals already were on Litecoin.
Yes. So the bounty was a public bounty he posted on his Twitter page, and I stumbled across it after I got familiarized myself with all of the Bitcoin ordinals that were going on first. I stumbled upon this bounty and realized, yes, it can be done on Litecoin. There just has to be minor change to the Rust open source projects that Casey started, as well as some other things. But yeah, it came together. I pretty much programmed it within a week and inscribed the first ordinal, which was the MWeb white paper.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
it almost seems like ancient history now, because it's been over a year. The time's flown by, and now we have Runes. Between the activation of Runes on Bitcoin and Litecoin, it was the Bitcoin halving, I believe, as it activated there, and then again here, I want to say, at least where I was living, April 27th in the evening. I think it was around 8:30 or 9:30 at night. So Runes to Litecoin was brought over very swiftly. How long were ordinals on Bitcoin before you brought them to Litecoin with that bounty?
I want to say it was a month. It was so long ago. I don't even remember now.
Yeah.
Time's gone so fast and so many things have happened. But I think it was about a month. And yeah, with runes, like you said, it was just over a week, or it might have been a bit less than a week. I tried to launch it at the same time as Bitcoin, but software wise, it wasn't ready.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, this stuff happens quickly. Bitcoin has ordinals. Bitcoin has Bitcoin tokens, or BRC20 tokens, or perhaps BTC20 tokens. And then, of course, runes. So why do we bring these to Litecoin?
Well, Litecoin, I think, is a better platform for these ordinals. Bitcoin is kind of slow and clunky. You have a block every 10 minutes or so. Litecoin, there's enough space on chain. There isn't really much congestion. You have 2.5 minute blocks. Things move rapidly compared to Bitcoin. And I think for these protocols that are kind of testing the limits of these blockchains, it's probably best suited for chains with more capacity. But obviously, not everyone has seen that. It's definitely not as popular as what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin has probably 99% of the volume in the entire ordinal space. And I don't see that changing anytime soon, unfortunately, but that's just how things are.
Even with their block limitations, you don't see that changing.
Over the long term, there's infinite block space, so people can inscribe at
Mm.
their leisure. They can do it in a week or so, but most people want their projects on Bitcoin. Um, but maybe things will change. Maybe some good developers will launch their projects like Luke has on Litecoin. And I guess I'm grateful that he did that to draw attention to Litecoin um, in a bigger fashion than most other projects that just come, mint a few things, and disappear. He stayed around and helped develop the space.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubting that or arguing that Bitcoin is king in a lot of these developments. I mean, we're bringing things after the fact, and that's been the case for a while between the coding or the code base of Litecoin coming from Bitcoin, and we've often taken things from Bitcoin. I always like when we say, Bitcoin coders and Litecoin coders are the same. You can open up Litecoin Core and it'll say the Bitcoin developer is the Litecoin developer. So I always like to remember that, and I like to share that with maximalists too. And they don't like to hear it, but it's very similar protocol, right? It's a similar blockchain, albeit with some differences. And of course, Litecoin has some advantages. Like you said, it's faster. The blocks are more frequent in terms of time. Don't have to wait as long. Of course, we have MWeb now. We proved that certainly first. I don't see Bitcoin adopting it, although who knows? Um, but we're very similar. But there's no question that Bitcoin is king in many, many, many ways, and they are the premium kind of projects. However, that's going to price a lot of people out. If you want to go and play around with ordinals and some sort of sandbox system, it's not going to be Bitcoin unless you just have a lot of Bitcoin. And I think that's becoming more difficult for people to, I guess, it Bitcoin, with the price going up as it's gone up in the past few years, despite dips, it's a lot more expensive than it's ever been. Fees are more expensive than they've ever been. So you have to really have a lot of resources to just, quote, maybe mess around with ordinals on Bitcoin, right? When Litecoin, it's a lot cheaper to do that. So I think that's a big advantage, and we'll see what happens in time, because I do think, and I'm not the only one in our community that thinks this, that, Litecoin is the perfect substitute for Bitcoin. If you like the Bitcoin experience, you're going to get it with Litecoin, and it's going to be a little bit better. So that's a good point you make about infinite blocks, right, going forward. And if you adjust your, quote, time preferences, you can get your ordinal in. But I don't know how much you're going to pay. And that would be interesting if Bitcoin becomes just a inscription minting service versus a money. But I guess time will tell. But we'll have to see. But interesting point. I appreciate your response to that question. I think it's important. If we have it on Bitcoin, why do we need to duplicate it here? Well, I think there's good reason to do that, and we have it. So um, let's just go maybe back to basics. Again, we've talked about ordinals, we've talked about tokens on this show, but we've not really laid them out systematically. I hope we can do that today. I don't know if we will, but you're the guy to go to. So I'm going to try. So, ground floor, baseline stuff, definitions, structuring. I understand that ordinal inscriptions are basically meta features to layer one Litecoin. Similarly, LTC20 tokens are meta features to inscriptions, right? Runes are an expansion even further, and we want to talk about that today because those are brand new. Despite the meta layering, these are all layer one or on-chain Litecoin, correct?
Yes. So these are all layer one. So the inscription and the data itself is all layer one. What isn't layer one is the indexing. That is not layer one. The indexing follows specific rules similar to the way, I guess, blocks are approved in mine, but in a kind of lesser fashion. And so essentially, what the indexer does is give us this book to read, and we can find out where inscriptions live and which sats they are linked to, and those sorts of things. If you want me to dive in deeper, just
Yeah,
let me know.
please
Yeah.
do. I don't know if I can follow you, but please do. What is the indexer? Is that the Ord client, or what's the indexer?
Yes. So the indexer is the old client, and when you make an inscription for the first time, it goes through uh, this taproot address, and you inscribe it into um, this script's part of the transaction, and that's stored um, on the blockchain, and it's immutable. You can't change it, but it lives in that transaction that happened when it happened. And what the indexer does is tracks the particular sats that the inscription was inscribed on. And it keeps tabs of that sat as it moves around. So the inscription isn't moving around, the sat is moving around, and the indexer tells you which inscription that sat is linked to.
Okay. My question would be, I never downloaded the Ord client. To hold, let's say, an inscription, you don't need to, from my experience. And I imagine the wallets like Stack Wallet, for example, renders these things within their wallet interface. They would be referencing that client on their end. Is that right?
Yeah, they would go through some sort of ORD API to pull those images from some address lookup or UTXO lookup.
So I guess my question would be: it sounds like they're permanent. I've done experiments where I've put them into MWeb, like an inscription, and pulled it out. It was successful. Now, the question is, if I would have left in there longer, would I have actually gotten it out? Under the circumstances and the test that I performed, I was able to get it out. So I didn't know if like the image, however these inscriptions are put on the Litoshi, if that would be scrubbed in any way or disconnected. It wasn't. So it seems like they're pretty durable. Except, does that mean they're durable as long as Ord clients are running? Because what if all of the instances of the Ord client were turned off globally, period? Would we still be able to experience these inscriptions, or is that a vulnerability? Because we wouldn't be able to read them, right?
You wouldn't be able to read them in a way that would be user friendly. You could still look at the data on the blockchain and see that there's a bunch of bytes that form some sort of file, whether it be an image or a PDF or text file, JSON file,
Mm-hmm.
would still be there. So when you create the inscription for the first time, whatever block it was inscribed in is where it lives. It doesn't move around. It is just tracked as a sat or a Litoshi by the indexer, and that's what's keeping track of it.
Okay.
So when you move it into like MWeb, MWeb is basically a pool of Litecoin that moves every single block to a new address. And when you peg in, your Litecoin goes to the top of the pool. And when you peg out, you pull Litecoin off the top of the pool. So Ord would be keeping track of the sats going in and the sats going out, which is why when you pegged in and pegged out into MWeb, you're still able to, you were able to find your inscription.
Yeah,
That
no, that makes sense. We were wondering if it, okay, yeah, so it's durable. I think that's what I was trying to, we didn't know, because all of
Yeah.
this was very new, and even David BURKETT didn't entirely know how the inscription, I guess, how they were working at the time when they were brand new. And he's criticized ordinals to a degree. Um, but we just didn't know. So I sent one in. I pulled it out. It was a success. I was able to render it. There's a thread I have somewhere on X where I kind of go through it with screenshots. Maybe I'll throw that in the show notes. But they are durable. But it's just if I would have left that in longer, somebody else when they pulled out may have actually gotten that ordinal. So that's the part where we can't control when we're in MWeb. But it didn't harm the actual inscription. It's just whether or not I would have ended up lotterying that away if we would have kept it there and over a longer period of time. And someone else, for example, requested to peg out instead of me, well, that interesting. Do you want to say anything more about the Ord client? It sounds like my initial question, it's extremely unlikely, but even if all the Ord clients were off, it's not like you'd erase ordinals. You just wouldn't render them the same way. They'd still be there. We just wouldn't read them.
Yeah, it'd be similar to the text in the first block on Bitcoin and Litecoin. It's still there. You just can't read it easily.
Okay.
Sort of type of thing.
So can you tell us what exactly, because we never defined it on the show, what exactly is ordinal theory? How would you define it? Are ordinals and inscriptions synonyms, or are ordinals a specific type of inscription, whereas runes are another type of inscription? So kind of bundled the question for you there. But what's ordinal theory? And while I assume certain terms are the same thing, I might be wrong. And I guess I'm asking you to clarify.
Yeah. So ordinal theory is the theory in which I guess Casey came up with it, that every sat can be tracked throughout its entire lifetime, whether it's moved from one input to 100 outputs. Each of those sats or Litoshis will be able to be tracked from the block they were minding through to where they currently are now. And that forms the basis of the Ord client. So the Ord client tracks each sat explicitly from the block it was minding, and it allows anyone to associate data with that ordinal sat. So you can inscribe data onto that sat and have it tracked through its existence, and it will never disappear unless it's lost in a wallet and can't be accessed. But yeah, it's tracked from input to output, whether it be inputs to another UTXO or into block fees. It's tracked there as well.
Okay.
So I guess that term, the ordinal, is the method, the definition for the tracking of the sat through at its lifetime, and the inscription is what's placed onto an ordinal.
So they are their own terms then.
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Well, they're used interchangeably now, but that's my understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I've used them interchangeably, but it sounds like they are actually functionally different. correct?
I believe so. Yep.
This whole idea about inscribing data on Bitcoin, or in our case, Litecoin, is interesting. We were never able to do it before. We can now do it thanks to you. What do you consider inscriptions or ordinals? What do you consider them to be? What's your just thoughts about them, their function? I believe Casey refers them as digital artifacts. Do you agree with that? Just curious.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. They're a way to express yourself. You can put any data onto the blockchain and it will be immutable. You can't remove it. It's there forever. So you could use it as an expression of yourself or like a political piece, say for whistleblower data or something like that, or to place a document which dictates a particular protocol, or even like decentralized websites or images can be placed on it and built from the blockchain itself. Obviously, I guess this wasn't the intention and it probably constitutes as block spam, but that's, I guess, another question.
It is another question. And I want to talk about that. But these are on layer one, on chain. What are the advantages of that? Versus, for example, we had OmniLite before. We still have OmniLite, but that's a second layer NFT solution.
Yeah, so I guess the advantages are that you only have to run one piece of software, I guess two now, but you run your blockchain, you run your Litecoin node, and the indexer, and that's all you need. I guess it would be the same as OmniLite. I'm not familiar too much on how that technically works, but you don't need much tooling, and it's easy to use, it's easy to run, and you can store data from one location and receive it in another, essentially. You've created this decentralized web, which I guess that's the what's it called on Ethereum, that database, the interplanetary file system.
Yeah, IPFS.
It's trying to do.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so IPFS, and I don't entirely know how that works. It is on Ethereum, but I believe you don't run nodes with Ethereum. At least the general person doesn't. But the IPFS data has got to be kept, and I've heard that even though it's, let's say, uncensorable, if the content is no longer hosted, it can still disappear, right? So if you set up a IPFS whatever and it's no longer served, it's gone. That's not the case with ordinals or these inscriptions because it lives on chain.
Yes, it's a step ahead. It's all on chain. You can't remove it. It's there forever.
Because I think some of the Ethereum and even OmniLite, when we were doing OmniLite NFTs, oftentimes it was like an IPFS image stored on an OmniLite, stored on the layer. What would we call it? Some of them were tokens. I mean, but like if I have my NFT that I got, it's the image, but it's not actually on Litecoin. It's just pointing to IPFS. And so what I mean is it's kind of a two-part to get your product. So if the IPFS ever stopped hosting it, then, well, you got a point that goes to nothing. So I think that's a big advantage of an inscription on layer one, is it's all there all the time, with the exception of if all the ORD clients were turned off and you couldn't render them, but it's still there. You can't detether it.
Exactly. It's definitely one advantage. I guess the disadvantage would be that you can't store large amounts of data. But I don't think we need to store large amounts of data. I think, well, maybe people want to, but I don't think they should, and that is a reason for a reason against like ordinals for the block spam that occurs as a byproduct of inscribing on the blockchain.
Yeah. Do you agree with these opinions that ordinals are actually block spam?
Yes and no. I think they can be used in a way that they're expressive as art or either politically or something like that. But yes, they can be quite spammy, especially with like um, protocols that are inefficient, which I would say LTC20 would be one of them, where you're just using the inscription once and basically throwing it in the bin after you've created a transaction with a LTC20 transfer inscription. So yes, they can be ugly and a waste of space on the blockchain, but in some aspects they can be, I guess, they can live equally on the blockchain with other transactions. If there's a unique game, for instance, or some CCO work that has been commissioned. But yeah, it's kind of controversial, definitely.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be the gatekeeper of it. People can do what they want.
Well, it sounds like even Casey had some, I don't know if reservations is the right word, but it sounds like he's not a big fan of most of what's going on in crypto generally. And he's not a fan of what's being minted or inscribed generally, yet he still brought it to Bitcoin to bring that activity to Bitcoin. And I guess his argument is, hey, if they're going to be supporting these transactions on Bitcoin, it'll expedite the fees rising. We need to get used to that anyway because things are only getting more scarce. So to him, it was worth it, I guess. And but he's called these NFTs and fungible tokens unsavory. That's a quote. He called them ugly or stupid, ugly wastes of time and space. And that actually sounds a lot like David BURKETT, the MWeb developer who was our first show guest. And again, that was in the environment of Ordinals. It was brand new at the time when we interviewed him, and he was very much against it. And personally, he's not trying to control any other human on the planet or anything like that. But personally, he's like, no, it's block spam. I would say block spam. It's filling up our nodes and competing with other money-based transactions, and he wasn't a big fan of it. So I think that's interesting, and it sounds like you can go both ways on that as well.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, I definitely agree with some of those opinions. In his case, he built a tool that was probably going to be built anyway. In the long term, people were going to figure out that maybe an ordinals type theory would be the best way to track sats, and you could inscribe on them and inscribe lots of data and fill up the blocks with spam, and make it super expensive for normal transactions to get through. But in the end, this is just all game theory. This was going to happen anyway, and there's not much we can do. Block space is limited. It's limited per 10-minute increments, and yeah, it's obviously not beneficial to crypto as a whole because you don't want to price people out with these enormous transactions. $30 is a lot to some people in other countries. They could probably live off that for a month. And people in the Western world just throw it away to miners. But yeah, I do agree with those opinions that it is unsightly some of the time, but it can also be beneficial. And let's be honest, it was going to happen. There's going to be basically what people are saying, a block space war with normal transactions. But when the protocol's been designed to have a limit, it's going to hit it, and we need to work around these solutions. And I don't want to be the one to have the come up with a solution for what needs to be done. Other people smarter than me are going to do that, but yeah, when you have a decentralized system, you need to choose between scalability and security, as well as decentralization. Obviously, you could go to a centralized system and it'd be much faster, and you could store as much data as you want. But that's not the whole idea behind cryptocurrency. It's a monetary vehicle where you can send money or a form of money from one side of the earth to the other without a middleman.
It's true. There's a lot of kind of things I wanted to pick out of that. The pricing people out of Bitcoin, I think, yeah, initially we were talking about the third world unbanked populations. And this is a departure from our general topic, by the way. But it's part of what I see as the problem of maximalism. Now, maybe this was inevitable anyway, and we're just expediting it because game theory, et cetera. But, in the early days, it was get your coffee with Bitcoin, and, these smaller payments can be done on Bitcoin, and Bitcoin was pretty cheap to send. Now it's not the case anymore. And so I'm wondering what the prospect is for Bitcoin actually helping, underdeveloped nations or populations. It doesn't look like that's the coin that I would suggest they use. If they have $100 of value and have to move a portion of it and extinguish 25 or more % of it just for the transaction fee, doesn't really make sense. But maybe this was inevitable the whole time. But we don't have that on Litecoin yet, which is another case I have in favor of course, Litecoin, is it is still very cheap to transact in extremely large volumes. And it's still a lot cheaper to, mint these sort of things that we're talking about and transfer them, and we're not filling up blocks. Now that could change. We if all of the Bitcoin blocks are filled, I believe some of that will trickle to us. It's already happening. If you look at BitPay in terms of what people are choosing to use as money, cryptocurrency, they're not using Bitcoin as cryptocurrency in most cases. They're using Litecoin a lot more, and that makes sense. So I don't want to say it's impossible for us to get to the point where Bitcoin is, but we're definitely not there at this point. So I think, despite the block spam, despite the degenning of JPEGs on chain, right? It seems that Litecoin infrastructurally is handling it pretty well. Would you agree with that?
Definitely, Litecoin has a lot of room to grow at the moment in terms of its usage. And I would expect it to maybe reach full capacity like Bitcoin has with 1 gigabyte mempool in probably within maybe 4 to 10 years, I would say, at this current rate. I don't think it's quite there yet, but we will definitely get there, and it will need to be a problem that needs to be solved. Otherwise, we're going to have huge, hugely expensive fees on one coin just going to another, and then it's be going to another again and again, and that's not what we want. We want to eventually reach a solution that's going to work. But I'm not sure if there is one. Maybe.
Well, that's when they proposed the layering, right?
Yes. So you go from layer 1 to layer 2.
Yeah.
Which will definitely be required.
Yeah, I think so too. And that's why, as much as there have been issues with the Lightning Network and its lack of delivery and the promise, I still think we're gonna, use second layers like Lightning, and hopefully they continue to improve. And I've heard the criticisms and get better, right? That's the whole point, right? We talk about it so we can not abolish it, at least in my opinion, but to make it better and do what it needs to do. So the future probably is layering with finite assets, but if you consider if all of human exchange is put onto these platforms or these blockchains, um, so time will tell. I'm not an enemy of layering. I do prefer on chain. I think that was the original model and should be used. But does it have to be? Do we have to be on chain for every single transaction all the time? Probably not. But the good news is we get to have that experience on Bitcoin and Litecoin. You can still have it on Bitcoin. It just costs a lot more. And the newer folks coming on board are not going to have what maybe Bitcoiners back 10 years ago or even 5 years ago experienced, right? But the Litecoin community still can operate on chain very well, very easily, and very affordably. So that's interesting you put a time on that. I never kind of sat down to consider, when will we match, for example, what Bitcoin is experiencing. So you're saying, did you say 7 to 10 years or something like this?
I think it was 4 to 10 years, I said.
4 to 10 years. What do you see Litecoin looking like, let's say in 4 years, if that were to occur? What's a fee? Are we still looking at a penny or less?
I th- I think it would be maybe 10 cents if we're reaching block space capacity per block. But no more than that unless the price significantly increase, which I'm not an oracle for the price. I don't know what it's going to do tomorrow. Don't even know where it is today. I haven't looked, but yeah.
I haven't
So
either. It's
$70
that
again.
early. I haven't pulled my cell phone out to look. The Litecoin podcast and the Litecoin, both the host and the guest are unaware of the price at Litecoin at this very moment. Unbelievable, that's okay. These are bigger picture things, but I think the price will continue to do well. But I mean, if we're still dealing with a 10 cent transaction fee, that's a lot higher than now, but that's still very cheap. So that actually sounds like, in that time frame, that may not be the worst thing, because I'm thinking if we're having a 10 cent fee on our Litecoin, what does Litecoin, the price, look like in 4 years? It's probably going to be higher. That's all I will say. So
Given it's basically programmed.
it's basically programmed. Exactly. It is a finite asset over time in an environment of unlimited inflation. So maybe we go to LRC 20 tokens. I call them LRC because of ERC, right? And I believe I had a conversation I did have a conversation. That's not the question. Luke was on the show, episode 4, and he was instrumental in that protocol on Litecoin. However, is it LRC20 or is it LTC20? I've heard both.
So Luke coined the term LTC20, and he told me the reason why he did this instead of LRC. And it was because loopering, which is I guess a layer 2 for Ethereum, is symbology is LRC, and he didn't want it to be confusing, so he called it LTC20.
Okay.
And the RC in ERC, BRC stands for request for comment, and it's I guess a protocol of something that they put on their GitHub or whatever, and they talk about it and see if they want to implement it into the protocol. But that's basically it.
How would you describe the LTC20 standard?
It's a bit bloaty. I don't particularly like it. I think it is kind of rushed and unusable as like a token vehicle. Just because there are a few steps involved. Firstly, you need to inscribe the token itself, and you need to be it comes on a first principle basis. So you need to be the first one to inscribe the token, and then you need to mint it, and you need another indexer to even index this and keep track of all these tokens as well as the inscriptions. So yes, it is a meta layer on top of ordinals. And then when you want to transfer the inscription, you need to create a transfer inscription, which transfers the value that you have in your balance to this inscription and send it to another address. And that extra step complicates things. When I was working on Litescribe, I built an indexer. And I don't know if you have heard the controversies behind it, but I guess I didn't do a good job at some points. It's since been fixed, but at that time, there were a lot of tracking issues with the balances with those LTC20 tokens. And I tried my best to fix it. Obviously, I'm working full time, so I can't dedicate a huge amount of resources to getting this thing working perfectly like the Bitcoin guys can. But yeah, tokens haven't taken off on Litecoin. And it's probably due to the lack of development, among other things.
How are the BTC 20 tokens? Are they being used a lot? I mean, I'm not sure if you have intelligence. I'm not following anything there. Have they really taken off and people are using these pre-runic tokens on-chain Bitcoin?
Definitely. They're very speculative. So I don't think anyone is using them for any serious means, or whether they have utility or not. I can't comment on that. I don't think they do. But yeah, they seem to be performing well price-wise and volume-wise on Bitcoin, with over hundreds of millions in volume a day on some of these centralized exchanges. But that doesn't have seemed to flow down to the altcoin ecosystem such as Litecoin.
I think for me, I've used Ethereum tokens, right? And the user experience there was good. Like if you had some Ethereum based token, it still behaved like a divisible token, right? And that's where I've had a hard time. And it could be because I don't have the infrastructure set up on my end. And to be honest, I didn't put a lot of time in getting any infrastructure. Like I said, I don't have the Ord client or anything else. But to me, it was a little bit strange and very different than, for example, using an Ethereum based token or even an Omni layer token, because Omni layer tokens are divisible, right? So if I created, an emoji icon and turned it into a token, right? Then I made, I set a total supply of, 10 million or whatever. I could still send them in individual units, right? They were divisible, not necessarily sub divisible. I never tried to break one of those down under one, and I don't think with the way I set it up, I could actually do that with the few things that I built. But I was airdropped an LTC20 token, I think through Labs, Litecoin Labs, who created the Moonbirds, and they got a few Moonbirds inscriptions, and then I think they airdropped Labs tokens to holders, right? And I think it was like 2,000 Labs. Sorry, Luke, if I'm getting your numbers wrong. But to me, I got it in like a single packet cluster, like single item ordinal, right? I'm calling it that. Even though it represented 2,000 Labs tokens, I'm like, to me, it looks like a unitary item, right? Like, how do I divide this into the 2,000 pieces to send 1 or 2,000 of the pieces? Like that, I didn't get. And I know I'm not the only one with that, I guess, question. And so it's not very intuitive to me. So how does that even work?
So if you wanted to break that 2000 token bundle up, you would need to create 2000 inscriptions and then send each of those to another person. That's the only way you could do it on using the LTC20 protocol, which is why I think runes are a much more effective and better solution for a token protocol built in a UTXO kind of cryptocurrency.
Okay, so I'm not incorrect. My bundle was essentially a bundle, and I need to do extra effort or add extra effort to divide them up as I see fit. Are people doing
Yes.
that? I guess that's my
Um,
question. Is anybody actually doing that?
I don't think so. It's quite because there's a lot of steps you need to take to even send that many tokens that the tooling isn't really there to make it easy, and people kind of give up. They don't really divide their tokens. If you go onto any marketplace, you'll see that they're listing just the tokens that they've been given. They don't try to divide it up, because there's a bit of effort involved into splitting those and getting into smaller bundles.
Okay, so I'm not the only one with these questions. Wow. So, and I'm sure well, I can't be sure of anything, right? I don't know anything about tomorrow. I would imagine we're going to continue to improve on this protocol, the LTC20. However, runes, it sounds, are a dramatic improvement over these LTC20 tokens. So we haven't even defined runes yet, but I'm curious if they're going to eclipse them and kind of make them irrelevant, or maybe not.
They'll probably live by side, at least on Bitcoin. Not sure about Litecoin. I can't comment on its future or whether LTC20s will rise again, as I hoped. But yeah, the runes, I think, are just better engineering wise, software wise. The indexer is integrated into the Ord client, so you don't need to build your own indexer to track the balance of these tokens around. It's quite easy. Casey and his team did a good job at bringing runes to Bitcoin and now Litecoin.
So let's talk about runes. I think it's time. That's the kind of the central piece of our episode. We've already gone 48 minutes without really defining them. Now's our chance.
Let's do it.
So this is the newest protocol in Litecoin. It was activated at block 2675600. What are runes? How do they improve upon ordinals and LTC20s? This deals with, I believe, the unspent transaction outputs, UTXOs, and their efficiency. And I hear something about op return. So tell us about runes.
So runes are yet another token protocol built on top of the Ordinals ecosystem, but it's a little bit different. So Ord is only used to track the etch, which contains the terms and rules in which define the rune itself. And because it's an ordinal on the etch, you can attach the image or the token image to it. But all the other information is stored in the op return, and the op return uses the scripts buffer, I suppose. And basically, when a transaction is sent to the miner, it will see this op return and return from that. But the indexer will look at the scripts behind that op return and whether it aligns with the rules of the indexer for the runes protocol. So the way the runes protocol works is that if you want to create a token, you etch the rules, which allows anyone after the block height in which that is committed to the blockchain or revealed to mint that token. And there are limits on how many you can mint, and each mint gets sent to a UTXO which contains the balance of that token. And then there's other rules dictating how the balance is transferred from those tokens to the UTXOs to other addresses or other outputs of another transaction. So these can be split up quite easily. You described a problem where you're trying to send 2,000. You had a packet of 2,000 and you were trying to send it to 2,000 other individuals. With runes, it's built into the protocol. So if you specify, I think it's a 0 amount when you create a transaction and you have 10 outputs, for instance, it will equally divide the inputs balance to all the output balances. So it makes it much more efficient. Do you have any more questions for the runes?
Of course I do. Of course I do. I always have to look at what I have written down and then compare it with what you've shared, to kind of continually revise my questions as we go along. But I guess when I heard runes were coming, I didn't know if it would improve upon ordinals or the tokens, right? And it sounds like it's really not. It's really more of a tokens protocol. For example, if one of the former things would be replaced, it would be the LTC20s would be kind of, like I said, eclipsed by this technology versus ordinals, because I think they're different in terms of why we're using these things. Is that correct? That this is a better token standard rather than a better ordinal standard?
Yes, this is a better token standard built on Bitcoin, Litecoin, or Dogecoin, or whatever UTXO model you're trying to put this on. I think it will replace LTC20, BRC20 in the long run.
Okay.
It's just better. I know there's a lot of tools out there for Bitcoin, so maybe it might take some time, but again, the ecosystem is young, so it might just take a bear market to get rid of it.
Okay. So we don't see ordinals and inscriptions and inscribing really changing a whole lot with this new capacity to etch a rune. They're just different use cases.
Yes, they are very different in functionality. So they can exist without the other.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine that the LTC20s and runes will coexist for a while too. It's just there may be a high preference to runes now that the cat's out of the bag. How do they? Well, I guess what are the parameters? And I use the word standard. That might have not been an appropriate term. I believe the LTC20 is a standard. But are the runes a standard too, or are there more like things that can be tweaked based upon whoever's doing the etching?
So all runes follow the same sort of recipe, I suppose, when you create them. So you can specify the name of the rune, which is unique and only can be etched once. Then you can also have the supply of the rune, and that can be divisible down to, I think, 36 decimal places. It might be less than that. I can't remember.
Wow.
But 36 decimal places or 0, you can make this kind of one-off thing if you want, or non-divisible. Then you can add your symbol to the rune. So this could be either a $ or an emoji. Then you can have terms for the minting. So this includes how many are pre-mined to a certain address. So this could be your team allocation, or if you just want a public mint, you can mix and match. But then you can set the terms for the minting itself. So say you wanted to mint a rune, the protocol says you can have 10 at a time. And that's as much and as little as you get. You get exactly 10. And then there's also rules specifying the start's height and the end height of the rune's mintability, which is the period in which you're allowed to mint the rune, and only between those two optional fields you're allowed to mint this rune, and then beyond that or before that, it will be unmintable. So you could specify a 10 block window for this rune to be minted, and if no one mints it, then there's zero supply, and that's it. But yeah, I
That's
think
pretty
that
cool.
summed up all the features. Oh, there's also this turbo mode. I don't know what that does. Casey said it was for future protocol changes, and that's an optional thing you can specify.
It sounds like there are a lot of options. I like the idea that you can like set a term of blocks for mintability. That's kind of neat. Um, yeah, these are interesting, and I haven't done anything with these. I've kind of surveyed what's been created so far. In fact, somebody created an 84 million rune set, and I had nothing to do with it. So I don't know the origin of that rune set or the minting or the parameters or anything like that. But they're interesting. I'm wondering which if any wallets support them. Um, I'm
Um,
not aware of any yet. That would like I guess render, but then again, these aren't necessarily image based, but they can be, right? Like the rune can carry an image like an inscription, but it's not like you have an individual non-fungible inscription, right? Um, but you
no,
can add
so
images to them, can't you?
yeah, so the rune image is just on the etching, which defines the token, and all the mints and everything else don't contain any ordinals whatsoever.
Okay.
They're they're just UTXOs that get moved around.
Okay. How does somebody go about deploying runes? So I've got an idea. I want to create, I've got my name, I've got my however many runes I want to launch, and the parameter set. I want to have it for 10 blocks or 10,000 blocks or whatever. How does somebody go about setting this up? Is there like a Litescribe type feature for this, or is we're just operating Ord within Core?
Yeah, so I think there's a bunch of services that for people without a Litecoin Core instance installed and synced, you can go to, I think Ordinals bot has one, Lightverse, Chicken Market, g- uh, Ordinals as well. I think are the major players in the Ordinal, Litecoin Ordinals ecosystem that are developing these tools. But if you want to run it yourself, your best bet is getting a Litecoin node synced up. It's only 80 gigs, and then running your Ord client on top of that, which is 20 gigs fully synced. And then it's all command line based. There's no GUI for it, unfortunately, but you define the rules in a batch file, and then you run Ord client on that batch file, which will do the inscription of the rune image and the etching of the rune token. And once the 6 block window, which is meant to prevent front running of certain tokens, is elapsed, then the rune itself will become publicly mintable or non-mintable if you did a full pre-mine, for anyone to mint and then use your token. And that's kind of it. There isn't much more to it.
I'm interested to see where all of this kind of goes. You mentioned Lightverse, Chicken Market, and Lordinals. They already have features built in that you can create these tokens.
um, I'm not sure about creating. I don't think.
I guess that's
I
what
don't
I
know. I
meant.
think Ordinals
How would I
offer.
initiate an etch outside of Ord? Because I know like there were inscriptions for ordinals. There was different, like I said, Litescribe, where you could actually put your text in or your image, and it would kind of do it for you, and you'd pay the fee. Then you could kind of deploy your instance of an inscription, right? I was surprised if that already existed with the short period that these runes have been live on Litecoin. So yeah, I believe the marketplaces have trading for runes, Liteverse, and I know Chicken Market I've seen. I haven't really looked much at the Ordinals one, but I guess that was my question. If you didn't have Ord, how am I setting up runes
Okay,
or minting them or creating
so
them?
there is one market which I'm looking at it now. I'm trying to bring it up for you. But oh, what are they called? Yeah, ordinalslite.xyz.
Okay.
Go there, check it out. It has so Ordinals Lite is run by the same people who run Ordinals Bot on Bitcoin, and they have an etching tool for runes as well as minting and normal inscription. Um, and yeah, these guys are pretty quick at getting their tools out. So I guess once they saw that I'd forked runes to Litecoin, they um, updated their site. Um, they don't like post this site publicly, but it was passed around in the Discord channel.
Mm.
Um, and I saw a rune with their website on it as well in the rune name.
Ah, that's
Um,
correct. It is. It is here.
mhm.
You know, I've seen this. This site's been up for a while. I forgot about this site, ordinalslite.xyz. Pretty cool. So you can mint runes just kind of on an easy interface right here. Cool. I may want to tinker with that. So
No
it's already
worries.
here in 2 weeks.
It's
We're
here.
already doing all this stuff. Pretty cool. So I guess here's another question. I'm going to go back to, again, somebody created an 84 million rune. Let's pretend I'm Google. And you know, this was the same on OmniLayer stuff, the OmniLite. You know, there was all these national names and emojis claimed and all these kind of things that were taken up in the early days, kind of like squatter type situations, right?
Yeah.
I'm not calling whoever created 84 million a squatter, but like let's say like somebody did create a rune called like Google or Apple or whatever, right? And then let's say actually Google wanted to go create a Google rune. Like is this to a degree arbitrary? Like they could just set up a new one and call it Google and like it doesn't really matter? Or like does that specific instance would be something they would want to go claim? Like I need that Google ticker, right? Does this make sense?
Yeah, so these rune names are unique. You can't etch another one with the same name. Once it's done, it's done. And yeah, they have it forever. You can't you can't get it back off them unless you have access to their wallet.
Okay.
But even then, these etchings are public. So unless they do a pre-mine of all the tokens, you might be able to mint some Google token.
Yeah,
But
it might be there. Maybe I gave somebody an idea. I don't know, but I was just curious about that because I think I heard Casey saying it wasn't that significant. Like if Google wanted to create a rune, they'll just set their own parameters and create a new one, and then like say, no, this is the Google rune. Like whoever set up that first one doesn't really matter. It's not actually Google, and in other words, you'd get over that point pretty quickly. But obviously, a name's a name. And if you're the first one to get Google, I think there's something to that, right? Or the first one to get 84 million or whatever. I just didn't know what your opinion was on that.
yeah, so for the particular name, it's first come, first serve. But if you want to run a business on a token and it's already taken, then you have to come up with a different name. That's kind of how it works.
Okay. In terms of explorers, I've used always the ordinalslite.com. That seems to have brought a lot of these runes there too. Are there any other explorers other than like ordinalslite.com that we know about?
There used to be one. I forget what it was called back in the day. But the ordinalslite.com website is run by Indigo and myself. So I help maintain and update that side.
Indigo is creating an alternate one too.
What do you mean?
I think you
Do you
released that
mean like
already.
another indexer? Oh,
No, it was another one where
Ord.io,
it
Ord1.
realized the pictures, and it was just another type of explorer.
Yeah, so that is built on. I know the one you're talking about. It's called Ordlite.io, and
Ordlite.io. Yeah.
it's built on top of Ordinals, the Ordinals client. So ordinalslite.com is the Ordinals client as you run it locally, but served to the internet.
Okay. So those are the places we go. I mean, it's got everything there. Ordinalslite.com. That's what I've always been used. I've always been using. It's early, folks. I can't speak. Please pardon me. There's a few more things I actually wanted to talk about in terms of the layout of Ordinals Lite and kind of like when you open up an inscription. And this may pertain actually more to inscriptions than to runes. But what is the significance of a Teleburn address? An Ethereum Teleburn address, I believe it's called.
Oh, so this is just another feature that I ported over from the Ordinals platform. So anytime there's an Ordinals update, I take all the features, whatever they are, and shove them into the new binary that is for Ordinals Lite.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at the top of the Ordinals Lite page, you can find a handy document link, and there it describes the. Let me find the Teleburn address because I don't even know what it's for. I think it's for when you want to, say, for instance, burn an NFT on, say, Ethereum and send it to that address. And basically, that inscription is the ordinal. It just becomes it somehow. Um, yeah, I think these are randomly generated addresses. But yeah, I'm I'm not exactly sure that it's used very much. But in the documentation, it says that a teleburning an asset means something like "I'm out, find me on Bitcoin." Um,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, there you have
that's
it,
kind of the
folks.
use case.
I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if it was like, oh, Teleburn. It's like old school, like burning, like that language, like from yesteryear. Like, oh, you're just going to copy it to Ethereum, or if it's like burned, like as in destroy, which I'm like, I didn't think we could destroy these after they were out, but maybe we can. So I didn't know
Yeah,
what that meant. So,
it's
um,
destroying it the other way and coming to Bitcoin or
okay.
Litecoin.
Okay. So it will be an Ethereum based NFT that you're going to turn into an ordinal.
Correct.
That's it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
Interesting.
you would send it to that address,
Interesting.
I
Okay.
believe.
Well, that's for those people that want to destroy all their Ethereum tokens. There is a way to do it, and you can come to Litecoin. I think. Is it supported for Litecoin too? I mean, I imagine the entire set is supported, but I don't know.
Um, well,
We need to test it.
yeah, I'm not sure how it's indexed or tracked
Okay.
because Ordinals doesn't look at like OrdScan, I mean ETHScan or something like that to determine that some Ethereum NFT has been burnt. I don't think it has that kind of information. It's just there for other people to kind of track and interpret themselves.
Okay. The other question I had regarding again, kind of the layout and some of the different things we see when we open up a specific ordinal and see the statistics and the different things listed on ordinalslite.com was the sat, or in our case the lit, right? Satoshi is to Bitcoin as Litoshi is to Litecoin. Ordinals are inscribed on a Litoshi, which are typically bundled in a packet of other Litoshis to send back and forth and to kind of buffer it, right? So you don't actually accidentally spend the ordinal in a fee or something like this. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah,
But
that's correct.
these this concept of rare sats, or in our case, rare lits, what is this about? And can you define them for us? Like, what is a common sat? or I'll use in our language, a common lit, an uncommon lit, a legendary lit. What are these things? What are they?
So the rarity corresponds to the location in a block or the epoch or something like that. So a rare sat could be sat 0 at the start of a newly minted block or at a specific offset in that block. And that's kind of just what it pertains to. So you could have blocks that of the halvening, and they might have a specific rarity attached to them. It might be a meta rarity, like they have on Ord.io, where they say these sats are from the pizza delivery guy that was he got 10,000 Bitcoin because he sold a pizza to this guy that wanted to give him 10,000 Bitcoin for some reason. And yeah, that's I'm not very good at explaining this. I didn't come prepared, but
That's fine.
yeah, the rarity on Litecoin, I don't think it's been tracked that much compared to Bitcoin, but yeah, it just pertains to the position of that sat in a block.
I'm curious if that will be. I mean, because if it's on Bitcoin, we could do the same sort of uh, identification system for Litecoin, Litoshis. Um, Curious. Somebody should set that up. Because the identification system's already there. It's just, I guess, whether or not you want to trade them. If there's like a trading system to say, hey, I have a legendary sat from, I don't even think one of those exists yet. I think those are like every 6 cycles or something crazy.
So it's the first sat of each cycle. I've got the list of rarities in front of me. I'll just go through them quickly.
Okay.
But so we have the 6 rarity levels. You've got common, which is any sat that's not the first sat of its block. Uncommon, the first sat of each block. Rare, the first sat of each difficulty adjustment period. Epic, the first sat of each halvening epoch. Legendary, the first sat of each cycle. And mythical, the first sat of the Genesis block, which can't be moved.
I thought there was one with the difficulty cycle and the halving, which was like a way long time preference thing. But anyway, thank you for that. I was always curious, and you just read them to us. So curious if anything like that is happening on Litecoin. It doesn't sound like there's any serious trading along those lines, but if people are interested, they can set it up. It's like it's like everything's about rarity, Now we can get into actual rare lits, which is just crazy. Just use your Litecoin, people, and ask your merchants to accept it and offer it to those and we don't give it financial advice on the show, but just spend and replace. Use your Litecoin. But of course, there's all these fun things too. So I do think they're interesting. I'm just not personally involved in them. I do think the ordinals are cool. I'm interested to see what happens with runes, as they keep unfolding as kind of a better token standard on Litecoin. I think that'll be pretty fun. But where do you see, back to runes, where do you see runes in, let's say, the next 6 months, 1 year, 5 years?
Probably 6 months. We're going to be right in the middle, smack bang, in the middle of another bull run. If we haven't already passed it and we're heading into a bear market, who knows at this stage. So I probably see them taking off quite well, whether it's on Bitcoin or Litecoin. I think both ecosystems will see some sort of hype cycle associated with runes. A year, we're probably still within that kind of same time frame as 6 months. It's a little bit too close. But 5 years, who knows? Just crystal ball gazing at that point. But I hope they're still around. I hope some other protocol hasn't come by or Ordinals ecosystem has completely collapsed. I don't think that's going to be the case. It's probably going to be similar to how NFTs have evolved on Ethereum, but they're a little bit more robust on Litecoin, I believe, on Bitcoin as well, where IPFS doesn't go down on Bitcoin or Litecoin. You're still going to have your images, not JPEGs or runes even. So they'll still be around, and maybe someone in the future will pick them up and build a entirely new platform or gamify Litecoin with these runes and generate a whole new wave of investors that want to get involved in runes, or experimenters or whoever. But yeah, there's a lot of things to look forward to, and I hope runes stay around for more than 5 years. But yeah,
A
who
question,
knows?
if I could. Do you know of any Bitcoin projects that are looking to migrate to Litecoin in terms of Rune use?
In terms of rune use, no. I think maybe some of the smaller exchanges might want to get involved, but that's all speculatory. I don't know for sure that that will even happen, but maybe some projects on Bitcoin will see that, oh, I could probably reach more people by putting it on Litecoin where the fees are low and there's loads more block space and trading is faster and cheaper than it is on Bitcoin. But um, I'm not sure what their motives would be. To be frank, yeah, I can't speculate on that at the moment.
No worries. We'll land the plane with kind of, we've talked to a degree about tokens, inscriptions, runes on Litecoin, specifically runes. What have I not asked you? What have I left out? What do you feel that needs to be shared that maybe we haven't covered in this general domain?
I think we've covered quite a bit about the whole ordinal ecosystem. I'm happy where we are.
Very good. Very
We're in a
good.
good space.
Go ahead.
We're in a good space. We're done. We made it.
We're in a good space. We've done. Yes, here, and a reminder that, you can store these in Core. You can launch them within Core with the Ord client. We'll put those links in the show notes. And something, this is a little bit peripheral, but the 84 million shop. There's the Run a Node kind of collection of crew neck and a t-shirt, and we've got a few things in there. Just note that if you do grab any of those items, we did announce this week that we're going to give a portion of each of those directly to Litecoin developers for this sort of thing, the maintenance of Core and MWeb and things like that. So if you're interested in running a node and then wearing that you run a node and kind of supporting that, take a look at the 84 million shop, and the proceeds will be partially diverted to Litecoin development. So I did want to mention that, because we always talk about running nodes on this podcast, and Lotion was on, and you've mentioned nodes here. Like it's a crucial part of our ecosystem, and it's still, everybody can participate, right? And especially with runes, you can literally create them within Litecoin Core. So get Core, use it. Add some of these add-ons and do even more with your client. And anyway, that's all I'll say on that. Any last things you want to end with, Anthony, before we close out?
Yeah, I guess what I want to say is thank you for having me on the show. I hope that it's helpful to your audience to understand what ordinals and runes and all these things are all about on Litecoin. And obviously, I want to see this Litecoin ordinals community grow. I'm pretty big stakeholder now that I'm dedicated to maintaining this Ord client forever, I guess, until Casey stops updating it. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Glad to have you. I think it's a valuable resource for me and for our listeners. Thank you for all of your work and setting all of this up, and and the cat's out of the bag. So thanks for your commitment here and bringing all this exciting stuff over to Litecoin. We're happy to see all this stuff, kind of the ability to build on Litecoin in new ways. So you're the guy. So glad to have you here. Will you be at the summit this summer?
I probably won't make it to that, no.
That is unfortunate, but I understand. There's a few occasions I didn't make it either. So, well, hopefully that changes, but understood if it doesn't.
I
But
might be able to make a video call into the summit, but that's probably the extent. You're not going to see me in person.
okay, fair enough. Well, either way, Anthony, we appreciate your time. Thanks everybody for listening and tuning into the 84 Million podcast. Of course, you can find all of our episodes at 84million.com/podcast. We're on X at 84 million, and we are on YouTube. So with that being said, we will see you guys next time. Thank you.